Hi, everybody. Let's give a round of applause to the amazing TED team for pulling off this unbelievable festival. Hello. Okay. I wanted to talk about why I'm here. A couple of weeks ago, I was asked to give a 10-minute speech on the future of education and youth and culture and getting the education system better, right? Those types of speeches usually have pictures like this. Students hand in hand changing the world, diving deep into technology, finding themselves, connecting across barriers, finding who they are, becoming extremely interesting, serving the next generation, working collaboratively to solve problems that are pressing, right? I'm not going to give that speech. The speech I'm going to give you is on a subject related to a piece of advice I've started giving myself over the last 10 years. And it's basically advice that will allow you to live an authentic and productive life and contribute to your society. And that advice is, don't be interesting. Do not be interesting. Don't be interesting. Okay? Let me back up. All right, about me, a little bit about me. Why am I talking to you about this? So most people know me as Mikey, not Michael. I run an organization called Afikra. That's what people think of when they think of me. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I'm a trustee. What that means is I am part of a group of people who are entrusted to think about ACS's long-term future, which is why I'm here. I'm also an ACS uncle. I won this race, by the way. Shout out to Ava and Alex. I'm an ACS student. Rest in peace to my hair. I used to have hair. Some of you also will not have hair later. And I'm a former teacher. Also, rest in peace to my hair. I used to have hair there, too. But more than that, I'm a community member, which is precisely what I'm trying to get at today. So after ACS, I left and I moved to the States. And I worked at some of the most impressive, interesting places, studied at some of the best educational institutions around the world. I moved to the States. I lived there for almost 15 years. I moved all over the place, became super interesting, very well educated, very well aware of the world. I lived in North Carolina, where I went to Duke, became super interesting there. Moved to Chicago, worked at an amazing consulting company, super interesting there. Moved to New Orleans, was a school teacher, super interesting there. Then New York, lived there for a better part of a decade, very interesting, worked at some of the best companies in the world. And about 5-6 years ago, I moved back here. And I know what you're thinking. I know. شو جايبك لهون? That's what you're asking yourself. أكيد, that's what you're asking yourself, right? And the only way I can answer that question is by talking about sandcastles. Because I think about sandcastles, and I thought about sandcastles all the time during that entire period. Because when I was a kid, I loved sandcastles. That's not me, okay? But when I was a kid, I loved sandcastles. I used to build sandcastles all the time. They'd be so interesting and intricate. As I got older and learned about the world, they'd have windows and moats and like bridges and amazing staircases. Super interesting. And that was like a metaphor for who I was as I built my own life. But the problem with sandcastles is you build them on beaches. This is the problem. This is a core fundamental problem with sandcastles. Huge problem. And the problem with beaches is you can't build routes, right? This is a huge problem. And eventually, you leave that beach. And psh, psh, right? That's how that worked. And so North Carolina, all the sandcastles I built there, raho. And then New Orleans, all those sandcastles, there were a lot of them. They had bridges and windows and meadows. They were amazing. All of them went, every last one of them. And the problem is that they never don't go. Sandcastles, there is not a sandcastle that ever survives, ever. They all die. They all go away. So no matter how intricate and beautiful and involved, they're just, heck, a show. So even in New York, the last place I was, this is not me either, but this is what showed up when I Googled cool guy New York City. I was trying to think of that. So even though I was like a super cool, interesting guy in New York before I moved back, I realized that was just a sandcastle, which made me realize that being interesting without purpose is just a party trick. You're a good conversationalist. You're hilarious. I'm hilarious. That's how that works. But it's not more than that, all right? So instead of sandcastles, what's the opposite of a sandcastle? What's the opposite of a sandcastle? A tree. A tree is the opposite. Trees have roots. You also can't really control a tree. You just build it. It's just intention. It's effort. Most of the work you don't even see. Most of the work goes down. Comes out. Also different. Trees bear fruits. Trees give life. Sandcastles don't give anything. Another difference. Trees are of the community. They become part of the community. You can't really move a tree. I mean, you can, but it kind of loses its whole thing, right? Trees become part of life. They become part of daily life. And if you're lucky, trees last generations. The trees you walk by every single day were not planted yesterday. They were planted like hundreds of years ago, most of them, not all of them, most of them, right? So trees are not interesting. So I realized that if I'm not supposed to be interesting, what am I supposed to be? School tells you you're supposed to be interesting. You're supposed to learn stuff and have cool factoids and have cool things to say. You're supposed to write interesting essays, college applications. You're supposed to be interesting. So what are you supposed to be if you're not supposed to be interesting? Let's think about the word, interest. Interest has like two definitions. There's the commonplace definition, which is like something that excites your curiosity and attention. But I'm really referring to the second, which is something that you have a stake in, like the financial definition. If you have an interest in something, you have a stake in it, you have skin in the game, you care, right? If you have an interest in a company, you care. If I have an interest in ACS, I show up to do these speeches, right? That's what this looks like. And I realized that it took me like almost 30 years to pay attention to the second definition, how that the second definition of interest is really what defines me. But it'd been staring me in the face since I was a kid. The great American philosopher, Christopher Wallace, had preached this to me over and over and over again. Time and time again, he'd said this to me, and I didn't really pay attention to it. So let me have you listen to Christopher Wallace say this very line.
I just creep up from behind and ask you what your interests are. Who you be with, things to make you smile. What numbers to that?
What he is saying in this line, very clear point, is he is trying to say that you are defined by your interests, not what makes you interesting, what you're interested are. Tell me what your interests are, who you be with. The second line is also good. Things that make you smile, what numbers to dial. But that's not what I'm talking about. The point was, I was very interesting, but I wasn't interested. So I guess my point is that if you're going to live a life that is productive and is rooted in something that is not only productive to you, stop building sandcastles and try to start planting trees, which is to say, don't just be interesting. Interesting is good. Don't just be interesting, be interested. Which is to say that start planting trees, start planting seeds. Have them turn into bigger trees. Have them last generations. Have them join other trees and have them be forests. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to tell you that you have to plant those trees in Lebanon. There are many places that need trees. But you need to pick a place, and you have to plant them properly. And for me, it's here. Thanks.